The walkie-talkie. That is what killed us. Not the Sherman tank, not the B-17, not the American soldier with his rifle. The walkie-talkie. A small box that weighed 5 pounds and fit in a man's hand. That is what destroyed the German Wehrmacht. And I know because I said it myself in a room I did not know was being recorded, in a building that officially did not exist, on a piece of land outside Washington, D.C. that had once belonged to George Washington himself. I said it to a man named Karl Bremer, who was sitting across from me, eating an American dinner that was better than anything either of us had eaten in 3 years of war. And I said, "Karl, it was never the Americans, it was the walkie-talkie." And Karl looked at me, and he did not disagree. I need to tell you who Karl Bremer was, and I need to tell you what happened to Karl, but not yet. Because before I tell you about Karl, I need to tell you about the first time I understood what I was actually fighting. Because that moment changed everything I believed about the war, and about Germany, and about the country I am sitting in right now, telling you this story. My name is Hans-Dieter Müller. I was born in Frankfurt in 1922. My father manufactured precision instruments, gauges, calibration tools, the kind of equipment that requires a man to understand that a millimeter matters. He taught me that a millimeter matters, that precision is not optional, that the difference between something that works and something that fails is usually not dramatic. It is usually 1 millimeter. I was 17 years old when the war started. I was 20 when they sent me to North Africa. I need to stop here and tell you something about what we were told before we went. Because what we were told is the reason nothing made sense when we arrived. We were told the Americans were soft. That was the exact word, like soft. We were told they were a nation of jazz musicians and film actors. We were told they had no military tradition, no ideological conviction, no willingness to accept casualties. We were told that 1 German soldier was worth 3 Americans in combat, that their soldiers would break under pressure, that their officers could not control them in the chaos of battle. We had evidence for this. We believed we had evidence. In February of 1943, at a place called Kasserine Pass in Tunisia, the German Afrika Korps under Field Marshal Rommel inflicted a devastating defeat on American forces. I was there. I watched American units break and run. I watched officers lose control of their men. I watched equipment abandoned in the road. Perfectly good equipment, abandoned because the men driving it had panicked. 6,000 American casualties in a few days. Rommel himself wrote that the Americans had shown their inexperience. We believed him. Every German soldier who was at Kasserine Pass believed him. I want to tell you what happened in the months after Kasserine Pass, because this is the part that nobody in Germany understood. And this is the part that I spent 40 years understanding after the war ended. The Americans did not quit. That is the simple version. The longer version is more complicated and more important. The Americans went away after Kasserine Pass and they came back different. Not better in the ways we expected. Not braver, not more fanatical, not more willing to accept casualties. Different in a way that had nothing to do with the individual soldier at all. They came back with something behind them that we could not overcome regardless of how well we fought. But I am getting ahead of myself. Before I tell you what I found out about what was behind them, I need to tell you about the morning I was captured. Because the morning I was captured is when I first started to understand that everything I had been told was wrong. And I need to tell you about a specific American soldier who was the first American I spoke to after I raised my hands. I will come back to him, but his name was Thomas. I do not know his last name. I only know his first name because he told it to me while he was giving me a cigarette, and the cigarette matters. I will explain why. It was May of 1943, Tunisia. The Afrika Korps had been pushed into an increasingly small pocket of territory, and it was clear to every German soldier on the ground, if not to the high command in Berlin, that the campaign was finished. On the morning of my capture, I was the senior surviving soldier in what remained of my company. There were 7 of us. We had one working rifle between us. We had not eaten properly in 4 days. We walked out of an olive grove with our hands up. The Americans who took us were not what I expected. I want to be very precise about what I expected, because my expectation reveals something important about what the German army had been told. I expected contempt. I expected the specific contempt of victors toward defeated enemies. This was what we had been taught to expect. This was what German propaganda said Americans were like. What I got was Thomas. Thomas was 21 years old, from a place called Ohio. He spoke no German. I spoke almost no English. He gestured for us to sit down in the shade of the olive trees. Then he gave us water from his canteen. Then he sat down in the sun himself, in the sun, not the shade, leaving the shade for the prisoners. And he ate a ration and offered us what remained. Then he gave me a cigarette, an American cigarette, Lucky Strike. I had not had a cigarette in 11 days. I want to tell you what I thought sitting under that olive tree in Tunisia in May of 1943, with an American cigarette in my hand. I thought, this is a mistake. This is a propaganda trick. They are being kind to us because someone with a camera is nearby. This kindness cannot be real, because the Americans we had been told about are not capable of it. There was no camera. They processed us through a collection point and then another collection point, and then eventually they put us on a ship. I did not know where the ship was going. It took me several days to understand that the ship was going to America. I want to try to explain what that felt like. I had been fighting Americans for months. Now I was being transported to their country, to live in it, as a prisoner, but in it. The country they brought me to was nothing like the country we had been told about. I need to tell you about the facility they sent me to first, because this facility is the reason I am talking to you today. This facility is where I said the thing about the walkie-talkie to Karl Bremer and where I did not know I was being recorded. And what happened in that facility changed everything about how I understood the war and the Americans, and eventually why I never went back to Germany. The facility was outside Washington, D.C. I did not know its name at the time. I found out many years later that it was called Fort Hunt, that its mailing address was P.O. Box 1142, that it officially did not exist, that every room in it was fitted with hidden microphones, that German-speaking Americans monitored our conversations 24 hours a day in a concrete bunker outside the compound, while we played chess and ate American food and talked to each other about the war, believing no one could hear us. We talked about everything. 15 Nazi generals passed through that facility, U-boat commanders who had sunk Allied shipping across the Atlantic, rocket scientists, intelligence officers, and ordinary soldiers like me who had seen the war from the ground level and had observations that the generals in their headquarters never had. Every word recorded, every conversation transcribed. 5,000 intelligence reports produced. The operation ran until August of 1945, and the records were classified for 50 years. I am 91 years old. I can tell you what I said now. I said the walkie-talkie killed us. But I need to explain what I meant, because the walkie-talkie was not the weapon. It was what the walkie-talkie connected a man to that was the weapon. And understanding that connection is understanding the American way of war, which is something that took me decades to fully understand, even after I had said it out loud in a room with hidden microphones in 1943. After Kasserine Pass, after the Americans came back from that defeat and came back different, what changed was not the individual American soldier. Individual American soldiers were not dramatically better than they had been at Kasserine. What changed was the system those soldiers were connected to. Any American soldier with a radio could within minutes bring artillery fire, accurate enough to destroy a specific target onto any position he could observe, not area saturation fire, not random bombardment. Targeted fire, responsive fire, fire that followed us when we moved, fire that found us in positions we had just occupied and believed were concealed. A German general named Fritz Bayerlein commanded the Panzerlehr Division, Germany's elite armored formation built from the instructors of its own tank schools, the best armored unit in the German army. On July 25, 1944, at a place called Saint-Lô in France, the American artillery system reduced his forward positions to what he called a Mondlandschaft, a moonscape nearly 3,200 of Germany's most experienced armored infantry soldiers rendered non-functional as an organized defense in a single morning. Not by American infantry attacking, by American artillery guided by men with radios. I was not at Saint-Lô. I was already in the facility by then. But I heard about Saint-Lô from men who arrived later, and what they said matched exactly what I had already understood. That the walkie-talkie was the weapon, that the individual American soldier was not what we were fighting. We were fighting everything that individual American soldier could bring to bear on us within minutes of identifying our position. I need to tell you about Karl now. I promised I would. Karl Bremer had been an artillery officer. He understood the American artillery system better than I did because he had spent the war studying artillery. He had been at Normandy. He had watched the American system operate from the German side of it. And what Karl said in that room with the hidden microphones is the most precise description of what it felt like to be a German soldier fighting Americans that I have ever heard. Karl said, "Hans, imagine you are a skilled chess player. You have studied the game for years. You know every opening, every strategy, every tactical combination. You sit down to play, and your opponent is not a better chess player than you. He is actually a slightly worse chess player than you. But while you play, he has access to a telephone. And whenever he wants, he can pick up that telephone and call in a fleet of trucks that buries your side of the board in pieces. The trucks arrive within minutes. Your pieces are gone. His pieces are still there. The game continues. It does not matter how well you play chess. The telephone ends the game on his terms every time." I said, "Karl, that is exactly right. I did not know anyone was listening." Now I need to tell you about the third thing, the artillery, the air, and the supply. And the supply revealed something much larger than weapons. We asked the Americans, "Where are the horses?" This was a genuine question. In the German army, 2.5 million horses passed through service. Artillery, supply wagons, even the elite panzer divisions depended on them. The Americans had no horses, none. Their entire supply system ran on vehicles, trucks, jeeps, specialized vehicles for every purpose. The Red Bull Express moved over 800,000 tons of supplies in less than 3 months. 800,000 tons. 24 hours a day. We had horses, and they were all that we had left. And when we got to the camps in America, I saw the third thing every prisoner talked about. The moment Germany had no chance of winning. The ice cream. To a soldier from a country running out of everything, ice cream in a POW camp was a strategic revelation. The Americans gave it because that was how they fed people. The quantities were so far beyond anything we received, we assumed it was a staged lie. It was not staged. This was simply how America fed an army. Behind that food was a productive capacity Germany could not match. A country producing 1 military aircraft every 5 minutes around the clock. Goering said Americans only knew how to make razor blades. He was wrong about everything, but especially this. The walkie-talkie was a symbol. A country organized so that one soldier's observation could summon the full weight of national industry in minutes. We were fighting a system that believed in individual human life, enough to spend its industrial capacity protecting it. not the other way around. I live in Virginia now. My children are American. My great-grandchildren do not know I was born in Frankfurt. I chose this life. I never heard from Carl again after 1948. I don't know what happened to him, but I know what I chose. I chose to stay. It started in an olive grove in Tunisia. A 21-year-old from Ohio sat in the sun so that the man he had just captured could sit in the shade. Thomas gave me a cigarette. He sat in the sun himself. I had been fighting for a cause that deserved to lose. I am still sitting with that.